The world was drowning in weapons. Every nation, every city, every individual. It didn't matter who you were or where you lived, everyone was armed. Advanced rifles, self defense drones, automated turrets, EMP grenades, laser guided mines. These weren't just tools for soldiers or police anymore, they were as commonplace as smartphones. But for all the billions spent on one thing no one could buy was peace. Peace was the rarest commodity and the one thing no one seemed to want. Borders that once merely divided countries were now militarized walls, and inside those borders, people lived in constant fear. The global arms industry was thriving. Every year, trillions of dollars flooded into weapons development and defense budgets. Governments justified it all in the name of national security, but everyone knew the truth. This wasn't about safety. It was a grotesque cycle of fear and profit, a treadmill of violence spinning faster and faster. Peace, if it could even be imagined, was at an all-time low. The idea of peace, true peace, felt like an ancient relic, something that had been left behind long ago in favor of balance through brute force. But this balance was fragile, a razor's edge of tension. The world had spent so much money on weapons, on defense, on escalation, that people had forgotten what it was like to imagine a life without conflict. The numbers were staggering. Every year, the world poured over $2 trillion into military spending. For the top powers, the race to build more advanced weapons never stopped. Hundreds of billions more went into research and development for smarter, deadlier tech. Artificial intelligence-driven combat drones, precision orbital strikes, biochemical weapons that could target specific DNA markers. All of it funded under the guise of protecting the future. But no one talked about how many times that money could have rebuilt the world. How many times it could have fed the hungry, housed the homeless, cured diseases that still ravaged entire populations. That $2 trillion a year could have eradicated poverty, built sustainable cities, or solved the climate crisis. Every dollar spent on weapons was a dollar not spent on life, on hope, on a better future. For the cost of one modern stealth bomber, you could provide clean water for an entire nation for years. The cost of just 1 year's military budget could have ended the global housing crisis 10 times over. And every time a new missile was launched, every time another arms deal was signed, it felt like one more chance for peace had slipped away. And now, as tensions rose across the globe, we were closer to an all-time low than ever before. The borders weren't just physical lines on maps. They were barriers to peace, fortified by years of arms races, endless conflict, and mutual distrust. Countries poured money into reinforcing their borders, building walls higher, arming their populations, creating a world where everyone was ready for war at a moment's notice. The rhetoric was always the same: we're protecting our people. But what kind of protection was it really? Everyone knew the truth. The world was sitting on a powder keg, and every nation, every faction, every individual had their finger on the trigger. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and everything could go up in flames. There had been opportunities for peace. There were times when diplomacy could have worked, when the leaders of the world could have chosen to de-escalate, to talk instead of fight. But each time, the opportunity passed by like a ghost in the night, unnoticed or ignored. The arms dealers, the war hawks, and the defense contractors always seemed to win the argument. And the cycle continued. The grim irony was that we had spent so much money, so much time, so much effort on building a world where everyone was armed to the teeth, yet no one felt safe. And in this world of weapons, we had nothing to show for it, except more fear, more distrust, and more destruction. The tipping point was close. There were whispers that some leaders had realized what was happening, that there were conversations behind closed doors about reversing the trend, scaling back the arms race, seeking some form of global disarmament. But even that seemed like a fantasy. It would take years, decades even, to undo the damage. And in a world this tense, that kind of time didn't exist. For now, everyone waited, living in a state of perpetual anxiety. The world was drowning in weapons. Every nation, every city, every individual, it didn't matter who you were or where you lived, everyone was armed. Advanced rifles, self-defense drones, automated turrets, EMP grenades, laser-guided mines. These weren't just tools for soldiers or police anymore, they were as commonplace as smartphones. But for all the billions spent on firepower, one thing no one could buy was peace. Peace was the rarest commodity, and the one thing no one seemed to want.